My wife's Thursday night book club had no books, no names, and no address, so I followed her and watched her walk into another man's house 2 blocks from our own. My name is Chester Wilson. Most people call me Chet. I'm 70 years old, a retired librarian living in Portland, Oregon, and I've been married to Marjorie for 42 years. We raised 2 daughters, Sarah and Emily, weathered financial storms, health scares, the usual terrain of a long marriage. I thought we were solid. I thought I knew her. 18 months ago, Marjorie announced she'd joined a book club. I was sitting in my reading chair, working through a biography of Truman, when she came into the living room with that particular brightness in her eyes, the kind she gets when she's made a decision and wants my blessing. "Chet, I've joined a book club," she said. "It meets every Thursday at 7. I hope that's all right." I looked up, genuinely pleased. Of course, that sounds wonderful. And it did. Marjorie had been restless since her own retirement from teaching. She'd mentioned feeling adrift, missing the structure of her days. A book club seemed perfect. Social, intellectually stimulating, scheduled. I supported it completely. The first few Thursdays, I barely noticed. She'd leave around 6:30, come home by 10, tell me she'd had a lovely time. I'd ask how it went. She'd smile, say something like, "Oh, it was great. Really interesting discussion. Simple, normal, unremarkable." But around month 3, something started bothering me. I'm a librarian by training and temperament. Spent 35 years at the Multnomah County Library System, most of them in reference and cataloging. My brain is wired to notice patterns, cross-reference information, spot inconsistencies. It's not something I turn off just because I'm home, and I started noticing something odd. Marjorie would come home from book club energized, talkative, full of details about her evening. The conversation was stimulating. The perspectives were interesting. She'd laughed a lot, but in all those enthusiastic debriefs, she never once mentioned a book title, never mentioned an author, never mentioned a single fellow member by name, just vague references. Great discussion, interesting perspectives. The group really connected tonight. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was being discreet. Maybe the books weren't memorable. Maybe I was asking at the wrong moment. But my instincts kept whispering. One Thursday in early spring, I asked directly, "What book are you all reading right now?" Marjorie paused, just a fraction of a second, before answering, "Oh, we're between books at the moment. You know how it is. Picking the next one takes forever." 2 weeks later, I asked again. "It's a newer author," she said, waving a hand. "You wouldn't know them." Another week. "We're still deciding." I didn't push. I'm not a suspicious man by nature, but I am an observant one. And after building a life together, 3 months of listening to my wife describe a book club without ever once mentioning an actual book felt wrong. It felt like watching someone describe a photograph they'd never actually seen. Close enough to sound real, but missing the details that make a story true. I told myself I was overthinking it, that retirement had made me too focused on small things, too much time in my own head. But the whisper didn't stop. Something was off, and my librarian's mind wouldn't let it go. In 35 years of library work, I learned one truth. When the details don't add up, someone's working hard to hide the real story. My job trained me to think in systems. Cataloging isn't just shelving books. It's creating order from chaos, noticing when something doesn't belong, tracking patterns across thousands of data points. A misshelved book stands out not because it's wrong in isolation, but because it breaks the pattern. Marjorie's Thursdays were starting to feel misshelved. I began paying closer attention, not spying, just listening more carefully, asking simple questions, noting her answers. One Thursday in April, she came home around 9:45. I was reading in the living room. "How was it?" I asked. "Wonderful," she said, settling onto the couch beside me. "Just a really meaningful conversation tonight." "What about?" "Oh, life, choices, perspective, the kind of talk that makes you think." I nodded. "Sounds rich. What book sparked that?" She smiled. "We actually didn't focus on the book much tonight. Just connected. No title, no author, no book. I cataloged it mentally and let it go. 2 weeks later, I asked if she'd ever bring a book home, maybe something I'd enjoy. "We mostly borrow from the library or use our own copies," she said. "Nothing worth passing along. A librarian's wife, not bringing books home from book club." The irony wasn't lost on me. I started watching for other details. She never mentioned where they met. I'd ask casually, "Whose house tonight?" And she'd say, "Oh, it rotates." But never a name, never a neighborhood. She never mentioned conflicts. Years of teaching had taught me that any group of women meeting weekly will eventually have scheduling issues, personality clashes, debates about book choices. But Marjorie's book club was apparently frictionless, perfect, unchanging. And then one Thursday in late April, she came home looking polished. Her makeup was fresh, not reapplied in a car mirror fresh, but recently done. Her perfume, the good one, the one she saves, was noticeable when she kissed my cheek. Her blouse was crisp, unwrinkled, like she'd just put it on. "Good evening?" I asked. "Lovely," she said, heading upstairs. "I'm exhausted, though. Going to wash up and get to bed." I sat there in my chair, book forgotten in my lap. You don't come home from a casual book club with your girlfriends looking like you've just arrived at a dinner party. My mind started cataloging everything like a reference query I couldn't solve. The missing book titles, the absent names, the vague locations, the perfect makeup, the careful deflections. I felt guilty even thinking it. This was Marjorie, my wife of 4 decades, the mother of my daughters, the woman I'd built a life with. Doubting her felt like betrayal. But I'm a librarian. I trust patterns. And every pattern I could see pointed to the same conclusion. My wife's Thursday book club wasn't about books. I didn't know what it was about, but I knew, with the same certainty I'd known when a patron was lying about returning a book, or when a citation didn't match the source, that something was being hidden. The question was whether I had the courage to find out what, and whether I could live with myself if I didn't. The moment I saw that dark, locked community center on a Thursday night, I realized my wife had been lying to my face for months, and I had no idea what else she was hiding. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before that night, I tried subtler approaches. Tests, I suppose, though I hated thinking of them that way. I wasn't trying to trap Marjorie. I was trying to be wrong. One Sunday morning over coffee, I mentioned a book review I'd read in the Oregonian, a novel everyone was talking about. "Maybe your book club would enjoy this," I said, sliding the paper toward her. Marjorie glanced at it. "Oh, we've got our list set for a while, but I'll mention it." She never did. The following week, I asked if I could attend a meeting sometime, just to see what it was like, maybe meet her friends. She smiled, but something tightened around her eyes. "It's kind of a women-only thing, honey. Sacred space, you know? I think having a husband there would change the dynamic." I understood that. I didn't push. 2 Thursdays later, I suggested she host the group at our house. We have a lovely living room, plenty of space, and I could make myself scarce upstairs. "That's sweet," she said. "But we rotate homes, and it's not my turn for months. Maybe next year." Every answer was reasonable. Every deflection was smooth, and every single one felt rehearsed. I started feeling isolated in my own suspicions. I couldn't tell our daughters. How do you tell your children you're doubting their mother without sounding paranoid? I couldn't tell friends without betraying Marjorie's privacy or looking like a jealous old fool. So I kept it inside, cataloging details, wrestling with myself. Then came the Thursday in early May that changed everything. Marjorie had mentioned, just once, weeks earlier, that the group sometimes met at the community center on Hawthorne. She'd said it in passing, the kind of throwaway detail that only stuck because I was listening so carefully. That Thursday, I told her I was meeting an old colleague for dinner. A small lie, my first. It tasted bitter. At 7:15, I drove to the Hawthorne Community Center. It was dark, completely dark. The parking lot was empty. The building was locked, a notice on the door about limited evening hours. No cars, no lights, no book club. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching, hoping I'd gotten the location wrong, hoping she'd said a different community center, hoping for any explanation that wasn't the one forming in my mind. Nothing. No one. I drove home, let myself in quietly, and sat in the living room until she returned at 9:30. "How was it?" I asked, my voice steady. "Wonderful," she said, eyes bright. "Really great discussion tonight." I nodded, smiled, kissed her goodnight, and later, lying beside her in our bed, listening to her breathe in the darkness, I felt the full weight of it. My wife had been lying to me for months, carefully, consistently, and I had absolutely no idea what she was really doing on Thursday nights. The trust we'd built over 4 decades felt suddenly fragile, like paper. I had to know the truth, whatever it cost me. Hiring someone to follow your wife feels like betrayal, until you realize living with a lie is the real betrayal. I spent 3 sleepless nights weighing my options. Confront Marjorie directly, but with what? A hunch? A dark community center? She'd have explanations, and I'd look foolish, paranoid, controlling. Ignore it? Impossible. The doubt would eat me alive. I needed proof, not for confrontation, not yet, but for my own sanity. I needed to know I wasn't imagining things, that my instincts weren't failing me in old age. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I researched private investigators. It felt absurd, sitting at my desk, reading reviews like I was hiring a plumber, but I approached it methodically, the way I'd approach any research problem. Credentials, experience, discretion. I found Kate Murphy, 42 years old, former police detective, excellent reviews emphasizing professionalism and sensitivity. Her website photo showed a calm, serious woman with kind eyes. I called on a Monday. We met Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop in Selwood, far from our neighborhood. She was exactly as her photo suggested. Direct, professional, no judgment in her expression as I explained my situation. I felt embarrassed, describing my suspicions out loud to a stranger. The missing book titles, the deflections, the dark community center. She listened carefully, taking notes. "This is a common request," she said quietly. "You'd be surprised, and you're not crazy for wanting clarity." That simple validation nearly undid me. She explained her process. She'd follow Marjorie this Thursday, document where she went, who she met, how long she stayed. She'd provide a written report and photographic evidence by Friday morning. Her rate was fair, discreet, professional. I wrote the check, my hand steadier than I expected. I gave her Marjorie's photo, one from our vacation last year, her smiling on the coast, and our car's make, model, license plate. Kate tucked everything into a folder, then looked at me directly. "What outcome are you hoping for, Mr. Wilson?" I thought about that, really thought about it. "I'm hoping I'm wrong," I said finally. "I'm hoping there's an explanation I haven't considered, and I'll feel ridiculous for doubting her. But I need to know I'm not crazy. I need to know the truth." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I'll call you Friday morning." We shook hands. I drove home. That night, watching Marjorie prepare for her Thursday book club, I felt a strange calm. I'd taken action. By Friday, I'd know. Whatever the truth was, it would be better than this slow corrosion of doubt. At least, that's what I told myself. When the private investigator said 428 Maple Street, I felt the ground shift beneath me. That was Tom Brennan's house, 2 streets over from my own home. The man the neighborhood thought was a grieving widower. Friday morning, 9 o'clock sharp, my phone rang. I was sitting in my study and hadn't slept for more than 2 hours. I'd been staring at the clock since dawn, waiting for this call, dreading it, needing it. "Mr. Wilson, this is Kate Murphy." Her voice was gentle, professional. The tone told me everything before she said another word. "I followed your wife last night," she began. "She didn't go to any community center or book meeting." My hand started shaking. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. "She drove directly to 428 Maple Street. That's a single-family home about 2 streets from yours. She arrived at 7:15 p.m. and went inside. She stayed until 10:40 p.m. I have time-stamped photographs of everything. 428 Maple Street. Tom Brennan's house. Tom Brennan, the quiet man who'd moved into the neighborhood 5 years ago. The man the neighborhood believed was a widower whose wife had died of cancer. The man I'd waved to at neighborhood gatherings, chatted with at the mailbox about baseball and weather. 2 streets from my home, Kate continued, her voice steady and kind. The homeowner is Thomas Brennan, age 71. He lives alone. When your wife left his house at 10:40, they kissed in the doorway. Not a friendly peck, Mr. Wilson. I'm very sorry. The room tilted slightly. Decades of marriage, of building a life together, of trust and partnership, and shared history, and it was crumbling around me, collapsing into rubble over an affair with a neighbor, a man whose house I could walk to in 4 minutes. Mr. Wilson, are you there? I found my voice. It came out hoarse. Yes, I'm here. I know this is difficult, Kate said quietly. I have 47 photographs, all time-stamped, all clearly showing your wife's vehicle, her entering and exiting the residence, and the 2 of them together. I can email them to you within the hour, along with my written report. Or if you'd prefer to meet in person, email them, I said. Please. Of course. Again, Mr. Wilson, I'm very sorry. I thanked her. Somehow managed to thank her for destroying what was left of my denial, for confirming what my gut had been screaming for months. After we hung up, I sat in my study with the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to silence. Tom Brennan. The man was practically a neighbor. Marjorie had been driving past our house, past the street where we'd lived for 30 years, past homes of people we knew, to spend Thursday nights with him. The intimacy of it, the proximity, the calculated deception. I whispered into the empty room, "Send me everything." Then I sat very still, waiting for the email that would give me proof of what I already knew. 18 months of Thursday nights, 18 months of elaborate lies, and every Friday morning, she'd made me breakfast and asked about my day as if she hadn't spent the previous night in another man's arms. The email arrived at 9:47 a.m. Subject line, Wilson investigation, final report. I opened it. 47 attached photographs. I clicked on the first one. Marjorie's car in Tom Brennan's driveway. Timestamp 7:16 p.m. License plate clearly visible. No ambiguity, no room for doubt. Second photo. Marjorie walking toward Tom's front door. She's carrying her purse, wearing the blue sweater I'd complimented that morning. Her posture is confident, familiar. This isn't her first time here. Third photo. Tom opening the door. He's smiling. She's smiling back. There's ease between them. Comfort. The body language of people who know each other well. I clicked through them methodically, cataloging each small devastation. Photo 12. Them visible through a front window, sitting on a couch, talking, her hand on his knee. Photo 18. Kitchen window view. They're laughing. She's touching his arm. Photo 23. Living room again. Closer together now. I kept clicking. Each image was a small knife. Then photo 45. Timestamp 10:38 p.m. The doorway kiss. Marjorie's hand resting on Tom's chest. His arm around her waist. Her face tilted up toward his. The kiss isn't tentative or awkward. It's practiced. Comfortable. The kiss of 2 people who've done this many times before. I studied Tom's face in the photo. Average height. Gray hair. Glasses. Unremarkable. The kind of man you'd pass on the street without a second glance. This was who she'd chosen. This was worth our life together. I opened my calendar app and counted backward. Marjorie's book club had started 18 months ago. 78 weeks. Subtracting holidays and the 2 weeks she'd visited Emily in Boston, that meant approximately 70 Thursdays. 70 separate decisions to lie to my face. 70 nights of coming home, kissing me hello, telling me about her wonderful evening of literary discussion and female friendship, and 70-plus Friday mornings when she'd made breakfast, eggs and toast, coffee the way I like it, and asked about my plans for the day, sitting across from me at our kitchen table, smiling, normal, as if she hadn't spent the previous night in another man's arms. The calculated normalcy of it cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I printed one photograph, photo 45, the kiss. I placed it on my desk and sat staring at it as the morning light shifted across my study walls. I sat through lunch, through the afternoon. I didn't eat. Didn't move except to refill my coffee. I just sat there, looking at proof of my wife kissing another man in a doorway 2 streets from our home, and felt my chest physically ache with a grief so profound I couldn't find its bottom. By the time the room grew dark around me, I'd memorized every pixel of that photograph, and I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The man my wife was having an affair with wasn't a widower at all. His wife had left him for the exact same betrayal he was now inflicting on me. That night, unable to sleep, I did what librarians do. I researched. I started with Tom Brennan's public social media. Not much there. He wasn't active online, but I found older posts, tagged photos from before he'd moved to Portland. In several photos from 6 to 8 years ago, he appeared with a woman. Captions identified her as my wife Linda. She looked happy, healthy, very much alive. No obituary, no memorial posts, no condolences. I widened my search, found Linda Brennan living in Tucson, Arizona. Same woman from the photos, recent pictures on her own profile. Alive and well, living with her sister. Tom Brennan wasn't a widower. He was divorced. I kept digging. Found a neighborhood forum from his previous town, a suburb outside Seattle. Searched his name. Several hits from 5 years ago, all discussing the Brennan situation. I read through the threads, my disgust growing with each post. The truth, Linda Brennan had discovered her husband's 2-year affair with a married neighbor. The affair had been elaborate. Lies about evening work meetings, weekend golf trips, a whole architecture of deception. When Linda found proof, she'd filed for divorce and moved to Arizona to start over. Tom had moved to Portland 6 months later, and somewhere in that transition, he'd reinvented himself as a tragic widower, garnering sympathy and trust from his new community. The man had a pattern. He presented himself as lonely, wounded, worthy of compassion, and apparently, he used that persona to prey on married women, offering them attention and excitement while their husbands worked or read or trusted them. Marjorie, my intelligent, careful, discerning wife, had fallen for the oldest con in the book. A man who'd already destroyed one marriage through infidelity was now participating in the destruction of mine, and he'd lied to get close to her, just as he was lying to the entire neighborhood. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. Tom's ex-wife had left him for exactly the same betrayal he was now inflicting on me. He'd learned nothing. Nothing changed. Just moved cities and started over with a new lie. I printed out screenshots of the forum discussions, Linda Brennan's social media showing her alive in Tucson, the timeline of Tom's divorce and relocation. I added them to my evidence folder. Marjorie didn't just betray me. She'd shown catastrophically poor judgment, choosing a man with a documented history of deception and infidelity. A man who'd likely used the exact same playbook on her that he'd used before. The book club lie, the careful scheduling, the widower sympathy. She wasn't special to him. She was convenient. Another married woman, another easy target. That realization layered disgust over my heartbreak. I spent decades being the kind of man who solved problems with patience and intelligence. I wasn't going to let her betrayal turn me into someone I didn't recognize. Marjorie was visiting her sister that weekend, or at least that's what she'd told me. I didn't know anymore what was true and what was performance. I spent Saturday and Sunday alone, planning. Monday morning, I met with a divorce attorney, Patricia Chen, recommended by a former colleague. Mid-50s, direct, experienced. I showed her Kate's report. She reviewed it without judgment, then explained Oregon's no-fault divorce laws. The affair wouldn't matter legally. The state doesn't require proof of wrongdoing to dissolve a marriage, but it would matter in negotiations if Marjorie tried to claim she deserved more than her fair share of our assets. We discussed the house, our retirement accounts, the modest savings we'd built over decades. Patricia outlined my rights, my options, my timeline. I asked her to draft divorce papers. She said they'd be ready by Thursday. Oregon requires a 90-day waiting period from filing to finalization, but having the papers ready would establish my seriousness. Back home, I organized Kate's evidence into a manila folder, 47 photos in chronological order, the written report, the screenshots about Tom's history, everything documented, indexed, irrefutable. I wrote down key points I wanted to say during the confrontation. I practiced staying calm. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and rehearsed. I know about Tom. I know about the 18 months. I have evidence. My voice stayed steady. Good. I wasn't interested in screaming matches, wasn't interested in dramatic revelations or emotional explosions. I wanted truth, acknowledgement, and an end to the marriage with my dignity intact. I decided to confront her Thursday evening, right after she returned from book club. The timing felt appropriate. Let her come home from another lie, then show her I knew everything. Patricia called Wednesday afternoon. The divorce papers were ready. I picked them up, added them to the folder beneath Kate's evidence. Wednesday night, I sat in my study reviewing everything one final time. The photos, the timeline, my notes, the divorce papers. Years of marriage would end tomorrow night in this room, at this desk, with this evidence. I felt surprisingly calm. There's a certain clarity that comes when you've made an irreversible decision, when you know that heartbreak and devastation are coming, but you're walking toward them anyway, because living in the lie is worse. I'd spent my entire adult life being a man of patience, intelligence, careful thought. I'd built a career helping people find information, solve problems, navigate complexity. This would be no different. Tomorrow I'll solve this problem. I'd end this chapter, and I'd do it without becoming someone I didn't recognize. By Thursday morning, I was ready. The moment she walked through that door smiling, asking about my day like she'd done 1,000 times before, I realized I was about to destroy the illusion we'd both been living in. But only I knew it was coming. Thursday, 10:45 p.m. I sat in my study, the evidence folder centered on my desk. Beneath it, the divorce papers Patricia had prepared. The lamp cast a small circle of light across the dark wood surface. I heard Marjorie's car in the driveway, the engine cutting off, her door opening and closing, her footsteps on the walkway, her key in the lock. "I'm home." Her voice was cheerful, bright, the same voice that had greeted me every Thursday for 18 months. I heard her setting down her purse in the hallway, hanging up her jacket, the familiar sounds of her evening routine, then her footsteps approaching my study. She appeared in the doorway, backlit by the hall light, smiling. "Hey, honey, how was your day? I didn't expect you to still be up." I looked at her. This woman I'd loved since 1982. This woman I'd married when we were both 28 years old, full of hope and plans and promise. The woman who'd stood beside me through my father's death, through financial struggles, through the mundane and sacred moments of decades together. She was a stranger now. "We need to talk," I said. My voice was calm, level. "Sit down, please." Something in my tone stopped her mid-sentence. The smile faltered. "What's wrong?" she asked, but she was already moving toward the chair across from my desk, some instinct warning her. She sat. I watched her hands fold in her lap, watched her arrange her expression into concern. "Chet, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I slid the manila folder across the desk. It made a soft sound against the wood. "Before you open that," I said, "I want you to know something. I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago. I know about Tom Brennan. I know about every Thursday night for the past 18 months. I have 47 time-stamped photographs, a complete investigative report, and documentation of where you've actually been while lying to me about book clubs." Her face went absolutely white. "Now," I continued, voice still calm, still controlled, "open the folder." Her hands trembled as she reached for it. She pulled it toward her, opened the cover. I watched her see the first photograph, her car in Tom's driveway, license plate clearly visible, time and date stamped in the corner. She flipped to the second photo, then the third. Her hands were shaking harder now. She got to photo 45, the doorway kiss, and stopped, just stared at it. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I'd imagined this moment dozens of times over the past week. Imagined screaming, crying, throwing things. Imagined her collapsing in tears. Imagined her trying to explain. But now that we were here, I felt nothing but a deep, bone-tired calm. The illusion was over. The truth was on the desk between us in glossy, time-stamped color. Whatever happened next, at least we'd finally stop pretending. Watching her cycle through denial, minimization, and blame in under 3 minutes, I saw exactly how little respect she'd had for my intelligence all along. Marjorie set down the photograph with shaking hands. This isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed. Don't insult my intelligence, Marjorie. Chet, please, I can explain. Then explain. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. I'm listening. She opened her mouth, closed it, her eyes filled with tears. It just happened, she whispered. I never meant for any of this. It just happened, and I didn't know how to stop it, and I cut her off. 18 months isn't just happened. 70. Thursday nights isn't a mistake. You didn't slip and fall into an affair, Marjorie. You chose this. Every single week, you made a deliberate choice to lie to me, get in your car, drive to Tom Brennan's house, and spend the evening with him. 70 separate, conscious decisions. The tears spilled over. You don't understand. You're right. I don't understand how you could do this. She switched tactics then, and I recognized it immediately. The shift from victim to offended party. You had me followed. Her voice rose, indignant. You invaded my privacy? You hired someone to spy on me? There it was. The deflection. Make me the villain. I laughed then, a bitter sound that surprised us both. Privacy? I said. You've been lying to my face for 1.5 years. You've been sleeping with another man while I made you breakfast every Friday morning and asked about your book club. Privacy ended the moment you started betraying our marriage. Marjorie, you don't get to claim moral high ground here. She flinched like I'd slapped her. And yes, I continued, I hired an investigator because you gave me no choice. You lied so well, so consistently, that I started doubting my own sanity. I needed proof that I wasn't imagining things, that my instincts weren't failing me. Chet, you drove to Tom Brennan's house. My voice stayed level, controlled. You parked in his driveway. You spent over 3 hours inside his home. You kissed him goodbye in full view of the street. And then you came home to me and asked about my day. Every week, for 18 months. She collapsed back in the chair, the fight draining out of her. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry you did it? Or sorry you got caught? She didn't answer. I studied her face. This woman I'd shared a life with, a bed with, decades of memories with. I was looking for something. Remorse, maybe. Recognition of what she'd destroyed. But all I saw was someone who'd been caught. Someone cycling through the playbook of denial, minimization, blame, looking for the response that would make this go away. 3 minutes. It took 3 minutes to watch her try every manipulation, every deflection, and in those 3 minutes, I saw exactly how little respect she'd had for my intelligence all along. She'd truly believed I'd never figure it out. The folder sat open between us, 47 photographs of the truth she could no longer deny. When I told her Tom had used the exact same book club lie with his previous affair, I watched her realize she wasn't special to him, just convenient. I let the silence stretch for a moment, then I leaned forward. I want the whole truth, Marjorie. All of it. How did this start? She looked up at me, mascara streaking her face. Why does it matter? Because I deserve to know. After all these years, I deserve complete honesty. Just once. She took a shaky breath. When she spoke, her voice was small, defeated. I met him at the grocery store. About 2 years ago. We were both reaching for the same bunch of bananas. A bitter laugh. So mundane, right? We started talking. He was charming, attentive. He made me feel what? Young, she whispered. Interesting, seen. I absorbed that. When did it become physical? 6 months later, we'd run into each other a few more times, started meeting for coffee, then lunch, then... She trailed off. And the book club lie? That was Tom's idea. He said it would be perfect. No one questions book clubs. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the printed screenshots from his previous town, the photos of his very much alive ex-wife in Arizona. I slid them across the desk. Tom Brennan isn't a widower, Marjorie. His wife Linda is alive and well. living in Tucson with her sister. She divorced him 5 years ago after discovering his 2-year affair with a married neighbor. Marjorie's face went slack with shock. Tom moved to Portland and reinvented himself as a tragic widower to gain sympathy and trust. And apparently, the book club lie, he used it before, in Seattle, with the last married woman he was sleeping with. I watched this information land, watched her realize what I'd already understood. You weren't special to him, I said quietly. You were just convenient. Another married woman, another pattern he'd already perfected. He played you the same way he played her. He told me his wife died, she said numbly. Cancer, he told me. He lied, the way he's probably lied about everything. She stared at the screenshots like they might rearrange themselves into a different truth. I asked the hardest question. Do you love him? She looked up at me, eyes red and swollen. I don't know. I thought I did. I thought this was real, that he understood me in ways you didn't, that we had something. She gestured helplessly at the screenshots. Now I don't know anything. I nodded slowly. Well, I know something. I know we're done. The finality in my voice seemed to shake her. Chet, please. No. I held up my hand. No begging, no bargaining. You made your choices. 70 of them. You chose a liar who used the same tricks on you that he used on his last victim. You destroyed our life together for a man who was running a script. She started crying again, harder this time. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger. Just a deep, settled certainty. We were done. After decades together, it took me one sentence to end our marriage. You made 70 separate choices to betray me. I'm making one choice now. I slid the second document across the desk. Marjorie looked at it, not touching it at first. What is that? Divorce papers. I've already spoken with an attorney. Oregon is a no-fault state, so legally your affair doesn't matter. But it matters to me. I'm filing on Monday. There's a 90-day waiting period before it's finalized, but this is happening. She finally picked up the papers, hands trembling. Chet, wait. Please. Can we try counseling? Can we? No. The word hung in the air. Absolute. But we could work through this, she said, desperation creeping into her voice. People recover from affairs. We could go to therapy. We could. No, I repeated. Marjorie, you made 70 separate choices to betray me. 70 times you decided that lying to me, driving to another man's house, spending the evening with him was worth more than our marriage. You can't unchoose that. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is a thoughtless comment. What you did was calculated, sustained, deliberate deception for 18 months. She was quiet for a moment. Then, so that's it? You're just done? Yes. I'm making one choice now, to leave this marriage with my dignity intact. I watched her process that, watched the reality settle over her. Where will I go? She asked quietly. That's your problem to solve. You have 2 weeks to find somewhere. After that, I want you out of this house. 2 weeks? That's more than fair. You can stay with your sister, or maybe Tom will take you in, though I suspect once he realizes you're actually available, he'll lose interest. Men like him prefer the affair, not the relationship. It was harsh, but probably true. Marjorie sat there, divorce papers in her lap, evidence photos still spread across the desk. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. But you did, repeatedly, for 18 months, and you would have kept doing it if I hadn't caught you. She had no answer for that. I stood up. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. I'd appreciate it if you'd respect my space. We can discuss logistics tomorrow, but right now, I need you to leave me alone. She nodded, gathering up the photos with shaking hands, and left the study. I sat back down at my desk and stared at the empty chair across from me. Years of marriage, over, just like that. My voice stayed calm throughout the entire confrontation, measured, controlled. I'd kept my dignity, and somehow, that felt like the only victory worth having. Living in the same house with someone you've decided to divorce is like watching a movie you've already seen. You know exactly how it ends, but you still have to sit through the final scenes. The next 2 weeks were surreal. Marjorie moved into the guest room. We established unspoken rules. She used the upstairs bathroom. I kept to the master. We navigated the kitchen in shifts. I made coffee in the morning before she came down. She ate dinner after I'd already retreated to my study. We were polite strangers sharing square footage. Good morning. Good morning. There's coffee made. Thank you. Conversations pruned down to logistics. Who needed the car when? Whether she'd taken her mail? What time she'd be gone so I could use the living room? I noticed her texting constantly. Phone always in her hand. Screen tilted away from view. Probably Tom. Probably trying to figure out what came next for them. I didn't care enough to ask. Instead, I focused on practical matters. I met with Patricia twice more, finalizing details. We separated bank accounts, divided assets, established timelines. Oregon's no-fault system made it relatively straightforward. No custody disputes, no dependent children, just the clean division of a life built over decades. The hardest conversations were with our daughters. Sarah lives in Seattle with her husband and their 8-year-old son, Michael. Emily lives in Boston with her partner. I called them both on a Saturday morning, my voice steady, despite the subject matter. Your mother and I are getting divorced. Silence from both. Then almost in unison, Dad, what? Why? I kept it simple. Your mother's been having an affair for 18 months. I found out. We're done. Both were devastated, but supportive. Sarah asked if I needed anything, offered to fly down. Emily was quieter, processing. Both expressed disappointment in their mother. Not anger yet, but a kind of bewildered hurt. I love you both, I told them. This isn't your burden to carry. Friends started calling within days. Word travels fast in neighborhoods, especially when moving arrangements get made and lawyers' names get mentioned at dinner parties. I kept my explanations simple, consistent. Marjorie and I are divorcing. It's been coming for a while. No details, no accusations, no public humiliation. People pressed, wanted gossip, wanted drama, wanted to know whose side to take. I gave them nothing. We're handling it privately. I appreciate your concern. I could have destroyed Marjorie's reputation, could have told everyone about Tom, about the lies, about the calculated deception, but that's not who I am. She'd betrayed me. I wouldn't betray myself by becoming vindictive. Besides, the truth would come out eventually. It always does. I didn't need to be the one spreading it. 1 week in, I passed Marjorie in the hallway. She looked exhausted, older than her 70 years. How are you holding up? She asked quietly. I looked at her. I'm fine. Chet, don't. I held up my hand. We're past that. She nodded and stepped aside. Those 2 weeks stretched like taffy. Every day felt too long and too short simultaneously, aching to be finished with this limbo but also processing the surreal reality that my marriage was actually ending. But I never wavered. Not once did I think, maybe we should try to work this out. My resolve didn't weaken. If anything, it strengthened. Every awkward silence, every careful avoidance, every polite "excuse me" as we maneuvered around each other in the kitchen, it all confirmed I'd made the right choice. This marriage was already over. We were just making it official. When her car pulled out of the driveway for the last time, I realized I wasn't losing my wife. I'd lost her 18 months ago. I just didn't know it yet. Day 14 arrived. I woke early that Saturday, made coffee, and sat in my study watching dawn break over the Portland skyline. At 9 o'clock, a small moving truck pulled up to the curb. Marjorie had rented a furnished apartment across town, neutral territory, affordable on her teacher's pension, close enough to her sister. She was taking clothes, personal items, some furniture we'd agreed she could have. The dining room set her mother had left her, the reading chair from her side of the bedroom, boxes of books, photo albums, kitchen things. I stayed in my study, watching from the window. 2 men she'd hired carried boxes down the walkway. Marjorie directed them, pointing, gesturing, looking smaller somehow in the bright morning light. I thought I'd feel something. Anger, maybe. Grief. Vindication. Instead, I felt numb. And beneath the numbness, a quiet relief. This chapter was closing. Around 11:30, the truck was mostly loaded. I heard footsteps on the stairs, then a soft knock on my study door. Come in. Marjorie stood in the doorway. Her eyes were red, makeup smudged. She'd been crying. "I'm almost done," she said. I needed to say something before I go." I waited. "Chet, I'm sorry." Her voice broke. "I know that doesn't help. I know it doesn't change anything. But I need you to know. I'm sorry. For all of it." I looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman I'd loved since 1982. The woman I'd married in a small ceremony overlooking the Columbia River. Both of us 28 and full of plans. The woman who'd held my hand during my father's funeral, who'd celebrated promotions and survived financial scares and raised 2 daughters alongside me. Years of shared history, and I felt nothing. Not hatred, not love, just a distant, tired acceptance. "I hope you find whatever you were looking for," I said quietly. "Goodbye, Marjorie." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Goodbye, Chet." She turned and walked away. I listened to her footsteps descending the stairs, heard the front door open and close, heard the truck engine start, the hydraulic whine of the liftgate, the slamming of the cab doors, then her car starting, the familiar sound of her Honda backing down the driveway. I stood at the window, watching her taillights disappear down the street. The house settled into silence around me. No television murmuring from the living room, no footsteps upstairs, no second presence moving through the space I'd occupied for 3 decades. Just silence, complete and absolute. I sat down at my desk and let the quiet wash over me. It was over. The marriage I'd built my adult life around, the partnership I'd trusted implicitly, the woman I'd shared everything with, gone. But I wasn't losing her in this moment. I'd lost her 18 months ago when she'd made her first choice to drive to Tom Brennan's house. I just hadn't known it yet. Now I did. And now, finally, I could start processing what came next. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt like space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to begin again. When I heard Tom had cheated on Marjorie exactly the way he'd cheated on his ex-wife, I felt no satisfaction. Just confirmation that people who'll cheat with you will eventually cheat on you. 3 months after Marjorie moved out, I heard the news through the neighborhood grapevine. Barbara from 2 streets over mentioned it casually during a chance encounter at the grocery store. "Did you hear about Marjorie and that Tom Brennan fellow?" I kept my expression neutral. "No. What about them?" "Apparently it's over. Messy, from what I understand. He was seeing someone else the whole time. Some woman from his gym. Marjorie found out and confronted him. He told her she was being dramatic." I absorbed this information quietly. "She's pretty isolated now," Barbara continued. "Most folks sided with you once word got around, and I heard both her daughters aren't speaking to her. Sad situation all around." I nodded. "Thank you for letting me know." Back home, I sat with this news. Tom and Marjorie's relationship had imploded. He'd cheated on her exactly the way he'd cheated on his ex-wife, Linda. The pattern repeating itself with mathematical precision. I'd predicted this outcome the night I discovered Tom's history. Men like him don't change. They just rotate targets. And now Marjorie was alone, isolated from friends who'd lost respect for her, estranged from Sarah and Emily, who'd both made clear they couldn't forgive their mother's betrayal, living by herself in that furnished apartment across town, the affair that had cost her marriage, her family, her reputation. It lasted approximately 6 weeks after my discovery. 6 weeks. She'd traded decades of marriage for 6 weeks. I sat with the mathematics of it, the sheer absurdity. Years of partnership, of trust, of building a life together, discarded for an affair that didn't even survive through summer. I waited for satisfaction, for vindication, for some sense of cosmic justice served. Nothing came. Just a sad, tired observation. People rarely change. Tom would keep running his pattern. The grieving widower act, the calculated sympathy, the married women who made him feel powerful. He'd already moved on to his next target. Marjorie was learning the lesson I'd tried to tell her that Thursday night. She wasn't special to him, just convenient. And now she was discovering what I'd known all along, that relationships built on betrayal rarely survive the transition to daylight. I didn't tell anyone I'd heard the news, didn't gloat or comment or feel anything resembling victory. The universe had corrected itself without my intervention. People who'll cheat with you will eventually cheat on you. It's not karma. It's just pattern recognition. And patterns, as any librarian knows, always repeat. At 70 years old, after losing the life I'd built for decades, my grandson asking, "When is Grandpa coming?" became the answer to what comes next. With the divorce finalized and Marjorie's situation resolved on its own, I faced a question I'd been avoiding. What now? Portland held years of memories. Our first apartment, the house where we'd raised our daughters, the library where I'd worked, the coffee shops, the parks, the familiar streets. All of it was beautiful once. All of it is tainted now. One evening in late autumn, Sarah called from Seattle. We talked about Michael, about her work, about the weather. Then she mentioned casually, "Michael keeps asking when Grandpa is coming to visit. He misses you." Something clicked in my chest. I'd been thinking of Portland as my permanent address, my fixed point. But was it? I was 70, healthy, and had my librarian pension. My daughters were grown. My marriage was over. What was actually keeping me here? "Sarah," I said slowly, "would you think I was crazy if I considered moving closer to you?" Silence. Then her voice, careful with hope. "You'd move to Seattle?" "Maybe. I don't know. Is there housing near you?" "Dad, there's a condo complex 10 minutes from us. I can send you listings." I surprised myself with my answer. "Send me the listings." After we hung up, I sat in my study, this room where I'd confronted Marjorie, where I'd made the hardest decision of my life, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Unpacking my life into a Seattle condo at 70, I realized I wasn't running from what I'd lost. I was running toward what I'd been missing, being present for the people who actually valued me. 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I sold the Portland house. We split the proceeds per the settlement agreement. Marjorie took her half, I took mine, and bought a 2-bedroom condo in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood, 15 minutes from Sarah's family, walking distance to shops and restaurants, near a library branch. The move itself was surprisingly smooth. Decades as a librarian had taught me organization. I labeled boxes by category, created an inventory spreadsheet, hired professional movers who knew what they were doing. Unpacking, though, that was harder. I opened boxes and confronted memories. Wedding photos I couldn't look at anymore. I donated them to Goodwill, let someone else use the frames. Books Marjorie had given me over the years. I kept them for their content, not their giver. A library can't afford to discard good books over sentiment. Sarah and her husband David helped me settle in, hanging pictures, assembling furniture, stocking my kitchen with basics. And Michael, my 8-year-old grandson, was ecstatic. "Grandpa, can you pick me up from school sometimes?" he asked, bouncing on my new couch. I looked at Sarah. She nodded, smiling. "I'd love that," I said. "Can we start this week?" "We can start whenever you want." His grin could have powered the city. My new routine began forming naturally. Morning walks through the neighborhood, learning the streets, organizing my books. I'd brought hundreds, my personal collection built over decades, setting up my study just right, and Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, I'd drive to Michael's school, park in the pickup line, and wait for him to come running out, backpack bouncing, face bright with the simple joy of seeing his grandfather. "Grandpa, guess what happened today?" Small joys, new patterns. It felt right in a way Portland hadn't felt in years, maybe longer than I'd wanted to admit. One evening, helping Sarah with dinner while Michael did homework at the kitchen table, she touched my arm. "Dad, I'm really glad you're here." "Me too, sweetheart. Are you doing okay? Really?" I thought about it. "I am. Better than I expected, honestly. This feels like where I'm supposed to be." She hugged me tight. That night, back in my condo, I stood at the window, overlooking the Seattle skyline, and realized something. I wasn't running from what I'd lost in Portland. I was running toward what I'd been missing, being present for the people who actually valued me, being grandfather to Michael, being father to Sarah, being myself without the weight of a failing marriage I'd been trying to save. At 70 years old, I was finally building a life that felt authentic, not the life I'd planned, but maybe the life I needed. My 8-year-old grandson asking why I knew so much about books reminded me that I'd spent decades helping people find stories. Maybe it was time to write a better ending to my own. The Tuesday and Thursday school pickups became the highlights of my week. Michael would climb into my car, toss his backpack in the back, and immediately launch into a detailed account of his day. Who said what at lunch, what they learned in science, which book his teacher read aloud. The kid was endlessly curious, endlessly talkative, and I loved every minute. We developed rituals. On Tuesdays, we'd stop at a coffee shop near his school, hot chocolate for him, black coffee for me, and he'd work on homework while I read the paper. On Thursdays, we'd go to the library. The Fremont branch librarians got to know us quickly. Back again, Mr. Wilson? Michael needs books. I'm just the transportation. Michael would disappear into the children's section, returning with armfuls of choices: fantasy novels, science books, graphic novels about history. His tastes were eclectic, voracious. One Thursday, he asked me, "Grandpa, why do you know so much about books?" I was a librarian for 35 years. It was my job to know about books. That's the best job ever. I smiled. I thought so too. After the library, we'd go back to my condo. Michael would sprawl on my couch reading while I made him a snack. Sarah would pick him up around 5:30 after she finished work. But one afternoon, about 2 months into our routine, Michael looked up from his book and asked the question I'd been dreading. "Grandpa, why don't you and Grandma live together anymore?" I set down the apple slices I'd been cutting. "Come sit with me a minute." He climbed onto the couch beside me, his 8-year-old face serious. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "adults make choices that change things. Your grandmother and I, we grew apart. We wanted different things. It's sad, but it's also okay. I'm happy being here with you. Did she do something bad? Smart kid. She made choices I couldn't accept. But what's important is this. I love you. She loves you. And you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes marriages just end. It doesn't mean anybody stops being your family." He thought about this. "Are you lonely?" "Sometimes, but mostly I'm grateful. I get to see you twice a week. That makes me pretty lucky." He leaned against my shoulder. "I'm glad you moved here, Grandpa. You're my favorite person to talk to." My eyes watered. I put my arm around him. "You're one of my favorite people too, buddy." We sat there quietly, him reading, me just being present, and I realized this was what mattered. Not the betrayal, not the years that ended badly. This, connection, presence, love that was honest and uncomplicated. I'd spent decades helping people find stories in books. Maybe it was finally time to write a better ending to my own. Meeting Helen taught me something crucial. After betrayal, you don't need romance to feel connected. You need someone who sees you clearly and values what they find. The Fremont Library became my second home. I started volunteering Tuesday mornings, shelving returns, helping patrons navigate the catalog system, offering reader recommendations. The staff welcomed me immediately. Good volunteers are always in demand. That's how I met Helen. She was 68, volunteered Wednesday afternoons, and had the sharp, efficient manner of someone who didn't suffer fools. Gray hair cut practically short, reading glasses on a chain, cardigans in sensible colors. We bonded over a cataloging debate. "That book is misfiled," she said, pointing to a volume I'd just shelved. I checked the spine. It's exactly where the classification system says it should be. The classification system could use updating for modern subjects. It belongs in the new social sciences section. I looked at her. She looked back, eyebrow raised. "You're absolutely right," I said. She smiled. "I know." After that, we made a point of overlapping our volunteer shifts, me staying late on Tuesdays, her coming in early on Wednesdays. We'd grab coffee at the cafe across the street and argue cheerfully about library organization, recommend books to each other, trade stories about difficult patrons. Helen was a widow. Her husband had died 5 years ago. Heart attack, sudden, devastating. She spoke about him with clear affection, but no sentimentality. "I loved Robert deeply," she said one afternoon. "I'm not interested in replacing him. Dating at my age sounds exhausting." "I'm divorced," I offered. "My wife had an affair. It ended badly. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm better off. She nodded, no pity in her expression, just acceptance. Our friendship was easy, pressure-free. Neither of us wanted romance, which removed all the complicated dynamics. We just enjoyed each other's company. Wednesdays became coffee days. We'd discuss what we were reading. Helen favored mysteries. I preferred biographies. And talk about our grandchildren. She had 3, all on the East Coast. Michael was my only. You're lucky to have him nearby, she said. I am. Moving here was the best decision I've made in years. One Wednesday, about 3 months into our friendship, Helen set down her coffee and looked at me directly. You know what I like about you, Chet? What's that? You actually listen. Most people wait for their turn to talk. You listen. I smiled. Years around books taught me that listening is everything. Books only work if you pay attention. Well, it's a rare quality. I appreciate it. Likewise, we sat in comfortable silence, watching people pass on the street outside. I realized I was content, not happy in some explosive, romantic way, just content. Helen saw me clearly, knew about my divorce, my mistakes, my current life, and valued what she found. After betrayal, I didn't need romance. I needed someone who understood that connection comes in many forms, and sometimes the best ones are simple. Sitting here in Seattle today, 8 months after leaving Portland and that marriage behind, I can honestly say discovering my wife's affair was the painful gift that gave me permission to finally start living as myself again. I'm speaking to you from my Seattle condo. It's a Thursday afternoon. Michael's with his other grandparents today, so I have the afternoon to myself. My coffee's gone cold on the desk beside me, and through the window, I can see the neighborhood I've come to know well over these past 8 months. I've been thinking about what I'd want you to understand if you're watching this, and something in my story feels familiar. The biggest lesson I learned, the one I wish I'd internalized sooner, is this: trust your pattern recognition. For months, I noticed inconsistencies in Marjorie's Thursday nights. My librarian training, my entire professional foundation, was screaming, something's wrong here. The missing book titles, the vague deflections, the fresh makeup. But I silenced those instincts out of what I thought was loyalty. I told myself I was being paranoid, suspicious, untrusting, that our marriage meant I should give her the benefit of the doubt. And that was my mistake. Investigating wasn't betrayal. Ignoring clear evidence was betraying myself. If you're watching this and your gut is telling you something's off, trust it. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. Your instincts are pattern recognition honed by experience, and they're worth listening to. Hire the investigator. Ask the hard questions. Demand the truth. Not from a place of paranoia, but from self-respect. You deserve to know what's actually happening in your own life. Now, 8 months into my Seattle life, here's what my days look like. I pick up Michael from school every Tuesday and Thursday. We've read 17 books together so far. He keeps a list on my refrigerator. Yesterday, he asked if I'd help him build a model rocket for his science fair. I said yes. Wednesday afternoons, I have coffee with Helen. Last week, she recommended a mystery novel I'm halfway through. It's actually quite good, though I'll never admit she was right about the ending I predicted. I volunteer at the Fremont Library Tuesday mornings. The head librarian asked if I'd consider leading a cataloging workshop for new volunteers. I'm thinking about it. I joined a real book club. We meet monthly at a local bookstore. Last month, we read Steinbeck. This month, it's a biography of Teddy Roosevelt. People actually mention book titles. It's refreshing. I've lost 15 pounds from daily walks around the neighborhood. My doctor is pleased. So am I. And Marjorie? I think about her maybe once a week now, briefly, with indifference, not anger. I heard through Sarah that she's still in Portland, still alone, still figuring out her life. I hope she finds whatever she's looking for. I genuinely do, but I don't care enough to follow up. Here's what surprises me most. I'm grateful, not for the betrayal. Let's be clear about that. Not for the Thursday nights of lies or the humiliation of discovering my wife preferred another man, but I'm grateful for what it revealed. Marjorie and I had been living parallel lives for years. We were comfortable, but we weren't connected. We shared a house, finances, routines, but we'd stopped really seeing each other somewhere along the way. I was buried in my books and my work. She was restless in retirement, looking for something to make her feel alive. The affair was a symptom, not the disease. If it hadn't been Tom, it would have been someone else. If it hadn't been Thursday book clubs, it would have been some other lie. The marriage was already dying. The affair just forced us to acknowledge it. And that forced truth, painful as it was, freed me to build something authentic here in Seattle. I'm more myself now than I've been in years. I'm present for my grandson in ways I wasn't always present for my own daughters. I was working too much, too focused on building a career and a retirement and a stable life. I'm forming friendships based on genuine connection, not just proximity or obligation. I'm volunteering in work that matters to me, not because it pays, but because I actually love it. At 70 years old, I'm finally building a life that feels true, not the life I planned, not the comfortable Portland retirement I'd imagined, but something better, something honest. So if you're watching this, and you're in a similar situation, if you've discovered betrayal, if you're facing divorce, if you're 70 or 65 or 55 and wondering if it's too late to start over, let me tell you something clearly. It's not too late. You're not too old. And choosing truth and dignity over comfortable lies is always, always the right decision. Will it hurt? Yes. Will you have moments of doubt, loneliness, grief? Absolutely. But on the other side of that pain is the possibility of building something real, something that honors who you actually are, not who you thought you should be. Take it from a 70-year-old retired librarian who thought his life was over when his marriage ended. My life didn't end. It just finally began. Trust your instincts. Demand the truth. Choose your dignity. And know that whatever comes next, you're strong enough to handle it. I'm living proof. Before you go, do me a favor. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it with them. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening. I'm Chet Wilson, and this was my story.